Hey guys, welcome back to more r/entitled people Reddit stories. In today's Ripestories video, I survived years in the military, but nothing prepared me for my power-tripping HOA neighbor. When she literally climbed a stool to spy on me and called the police on me, she thought she would run me out of town, but she was dead wrong. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is an HOA Karen story that was submitted by a viewer via email and is titled Ableist HOA Karen calls police on me because I am a disabled veteran and wearing a bikini at my private pool. So a little background first so all this makes sense. I spent a long time in the army, but then I lost my leg. I won't go into how because it's not really the point of the story and I'm not looking for sympathy, but the short version is I came home with one leg instead of two. Most days I use a prosthetic leg and I get around fine, but on bad days when the stump is swollen or aching, I use my wheelchair. That is just my normal now. You adapt. When I got my settlement and disability sorted out, my wife and I decided to buy our forever home. We found this beautiful little place in a quiet HOA neighborhood, single story, so I wouldn't have to deal with stairs, wide doorways and a thing that absolutely sold me, which was a gorgeous in-ground pool in the backyard. Swimming is one of the few things I can do where I don't even think about my leg. In the water I'm just me. So that pool was the whole reason that I bought the house. I want you to remember that because it matters later. We moved in and for about 2 weeks everything was perfect. But then I met Charlene. Now, Charlene is on the HOA board. I didn't know that at first though. The first time I met her, she was just standing at the edge of my driveway, staring at my truck like it had personally insulted her. I rolled out and said, hey, introduced myself and mentioned that I was new here. She looked me up and down and saw the little disabled veteran plate frame on my truck and her whole face just changed. Not in a good way. Oh, she said, you're military, huh? I said, yes ma'am, retired, served a long time. Most people say thank you for your service at this point, even if they don't mean it, just out of reflex, but Charlene didn't do that. I'm a pacifist, she announced like I'd asked her. I don't believe in violence. I find the whole institution to be morally bankrupt. I won't pretend otherwise just to make you comfortable. I kind of laughed because I thought she was joking, genuinely. She was not joking though. She informed me that standing on a public sidewalk and that she found it distasteful that she was about to say something, but then switched to someone like me had moved into her community and that she hoped that I understood she would be watching to make sure that I respected the standards here. I just said, okay, have a good one, and went back inside. I figured she was a weird one-off and I'd never have to deal with her again anyway, but it started with the violation notices. The first one showed up soon. Apparently my trash bins were improperly stored because I had left them out 40 minutes past the pickup window and I'd been at a VA appointment. Fine, whatever, I brought them in. Then another one came because my grass was apparently a 1/4 inch too tall. Then one came because I had a small American flag in a planter by my door, which she claimed was aggressive signage that violated the decorative standards. I checked the bylaws and there was nothing in there about flags, absolutely nothing. Every single notice had her name on it as the reporting board member, every single one. My wife wanted to go knock on her door and have it out. I told her no, let's keep this clean. I have dealt with hostile people before in much more serious situations than a lady mad about my lawn, but I started a folder for this. I photographed everything, I dated everything, every notice, every photo of my supposedly out-of-control grass, all of it went into this folder. I had a feeling, just a gut feeling from years of experience, that this woman was building towards something and I wanted to be ready. One time I was checking my mail and she pulled up next to me in her car, rolled the window down and just goes, you know, the ramp you put in lowers everyone's property values. I'd had a small accessibility ramp installed at my side door, totally up to code by the way, totally legal, the kind of thing that you literally cannot be denied under federal law. I told her that, I don't care what the federal government says, she said, this is a private community and we have standards. And frankly, broadcasting your situation all over the front of your home is in poor taste. Some of us prefer not to be reminded. Reminded of what? I asked. Reminded that I lost my leg or reminded that I was in the military? Both, she said and then drove off, and I sat there in my truck for a second just kind of stunned. I've been shot at, I've had genuinely terrible things happen to me, and somehow this woman in a quiet little neighborhood managed to leave me speechless with pure pettiness. Now here's the thing about Charlene that became real clear real fast. She thought she ran this place. She talked about the HOA like she owned it and the rest of us were her subjects. She had been on the board for years and apparently nobody had ever pushed back on her because she made everyone's life miserable if they did. I heard from another neighbor, a quiet older guy 2 doors down, that she had once found someone for the color of their welcome mat. A welcome mat. The man eventually just moved, so that was the situation, and it built over and over the first couple months. More notices, more comments, and she would slow her car down when she passed my house, craning her neck to look into my yard. I caught her standing on the sidewalk taking photos of my house on her phone more than once. When I waved at her, she would just glare at me and walk off fast. And I kept everything in the folder. I figured eventually she would just run out of steam. However, she did not run out of steam. She floored it. The day in question was a hot day, middle of the week, sun absolutely blazing. My wife was at work, it was a wheelchair day for me, my leg was bothering me, so I'd skip the prosthetic. I decided to do what any sane person with a private pool in their own backyard would do on a scorching afternoon. I put on a swimsuit, which yes was a bikini because I'm a woman and that's what I swim and sunbathe in, and I wheeled myself out to the patio to soak up some sun before I get into the water. I should mention my backyard is fully fenced, 6-foot privacy fence. You cannot see into my yard from the street. You cannot see into my yard from the sidewalk either. The only way you could see into my yard is if you were specifically trying to, like, let's say, standing on something to peer over my fence. Hold that thought. So I'm sitting there in my wheelchair by the pool, eyes closed, finally relaxed for the first time in weeks. And then I hear it. That voice. "Excuse me? Excuse me." I open my eyes, and there's Charlene's head and shoulders sticking up over the top of my privacy fence. She had dragged something over to stand on. I found out later it was one of those little step stools from her garage, just so she could spy into my backyard. So I said very calmly, "Charlene, you're looking over my fence into my private yard. You need to get down." "What are you doing?" she said, pointing at me, her face going red. "This is indecent. There are children in this neighborhood." I looked around my completely empty, completely enclosed private backyard. "There are no children in my yard, Charlene. There's just me, in my yard, at my pool." "You're practically naked," she shrieked. "And that leg situation, it is grotesque, it is an eyesore." "No one should have to look at that. You're gonna traumatize someone." And there it was. That was the part that actually got to me. Not the bikini comment, the leg situation. She was looking at my body, my actual body, the body I came home in, and calling it grotesque and unsightly, calling it something children needed to be protected from. I'm not gonna lie, that one landed. But I also knew instantly that she had finally gone too far, and some part of my brain went very cold and very clear. Years of training were kicking in. Documents, stay calm, let them dig. So I reached over to the little side table where my phone was sitting. I picked it up and I started recording. I held it up so it clearly caught her face hanging over my fence. "Charlene," I said real even, "you're trespassing by looking over my fence and I would like you to leave." "I'm not leaving until you cover yourself up. This is a family community. I'm calling the cops." I said, "Go ahead." I genuinely said on camera, "Please do, please call them." And she actually did. She actually pulled out her phone, balancing on her little stool, head still poking over my fence, and called 911. The whole time she's on the phone with the dispatcher, I'm recording her and she doesn't realize that everything she is saying is being captured in crisp, clear audio and video. I wish I could put the 911 call audio in this post because it's just genuinely one of the most unhinged things I've ever heard, but I'll do my best to recount it. "Yes, I need to report a public indecency," she says all dramatic. "There's a woman exposing herself." A pause, the dispatcher asking questions, I suppose. "Well, yeah, she's in her backyard, but I can see her." Another pause. "Because I'm checking on a community matter, that's not the point." "She's in a bikini and she's a disabled person and it's frightening. It is an eyesore. Children could see." Longer pause. I could tell from her face that the dispatcher was not having it. "What do you mean she's not breaking a law? She's exposing her stump, her whole leg situation is just out there for anyone to see. It is traumatizing." "I'm a taxpayer and a board member of this community and I demand that you send an officer." I'm sitting there in my wheelchair in my own backyard recording this woman tell a 911 dispatcher that my amputated leg is a crime. Charlene insisted, demanded, threw around her board member title like it meant anything to the cops, and eventually they said they would send someone out, mostly I think to get her off the line. She hung up, looked down at me triumphantly and goes, "They're coming." And by the way, guys, if you would have been in OP's unfortunate situation here, how would you have handled this situation? Let me know what you would have done in the comments, and while you're at it, please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis if you want to help me. Thank you so much for supporting real voice readers. I hope you're happy. You should have just respected the community when you had the chance. And then she got down off her stool and disappeared. So I waited. I wheeled myself over and put on a cover-up, not because I had to, but because I figured I would save everyone the awkwardness, and I waited for the police. About 20 minutes later, 2 officers showed up. I'd already gotten the gate unlocked for them, and here's where it gets good. These 2 cops walk into my backyard, and I can already see on their faces that they know this is nonsense because the dispatcher had clearly given them the rundown already. One of them, older guy, looks around my empty fenced private backyard, looks at me sitting there in my wheelchair in a cover-up, and just sighs the deepest sigh I've ever heard a human being produce. "Ma'am," he says to me, "are you the homeowner here?" I said yes. "We got a call about indecent exposure. I gotta be honest with you, looking at the situation, I'm not really seeing it." I said, "Officer, before you say anything else, I need you to know I recorded the entire encounter, including the woman who called you standing on a stool or something, looking over my privacy fence into my yard. I got her face, I have the audio of the whole thing." His partner kind of perked up at that. "You got it on video?" I played it for them right there, the whole thing. Charlene's head over the fence, the grotesque comment, the eyesore comment, the leg situation comment, the entire 911 call where she demands they arrest me for the crime of being an amputee in my own pool area, and the older officer pinched the bridge of his nose. The younger one actually said out loud, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me." Now here's the part that genuinely warmed my heart. The older officer told me he had done 2 tours himself. He did not make a big thing of it, just mentioned it quietly, kind of soldier to soldier. He looked at the video again, looked at me and said, "Ma'am, you did absolutely nothing wrong here. You're in your own home, the person we should be having a conversation with is her." And then he asked if I'd like to make a report, because as it turns out, standing on a stool to peer over someone's privacy fence and then making knowingly a false police report is, you know, an actual problem. Filing a false report is a real thing with real consequences. Who knew? Charlene was about to find out, by the way, and the officers went over to Charlene's house, and I obviously couldn't hear what was said, but a neighbor who was outside told me later that Charlene came to her door all smug, clearly expecting the cops were there to tell her that they had dealt with the disgraceful disabled woman. And instead, she got a very serious talking to about misuse of 911, false reporting and harassment, with the older officer apparently telling her that if she contacted me or looked over my fence again, it was gonna stop being a warning real fast. The neighbor said Charlene's face went from smug to white to splotchy red in about 4 seconds. She started saying that she was a board member, she had authority, she knew her rights, and the officer just kept saying, "Ma'am, that's not how any of this works." And they left. I figured that was probably the end of it, but a scared straight moment. I was wrong though. It was just the beginning of the fun part. See, I had this video and I had this folder full of months of harassment. And I'm a member of the Neighborhood HOA Facebook group where Charlene, naturally, was one of the most active and obnoxious posters. She was constantly on there, scolding people, posting passive-aggressive reminders about the rules, and generally lording her board position over everyone. I sat on the video for a couple days, I talked it over with my wife, who is far less patient than me, wanted me to post it immediately, but I wanted to think about it. The more I thought about it, the more I realized something. This woman had spent months trying to make me feel like I did not belong, like my body was something shameful. Like my service was something disgusting, and she had done it from behind the shield of her little board position, confident that nobody would ever push back on it, so I decided that people should see exactly who their board member was. I posted the video to the group. I didn't add a big angry rant or something, I just kept it short and factual. I just said something like, "This is my neighbor and HOA board member. I'm a disabled veteran, and this is what happened when I was sunbathing in my own private fenced-in backyard. I'll let the video speak for itself." And then I went to bed. I woke up to my phone basically vibrating off the nightstand. The post went absolutely nuclear in our little neighborhood, and by morning it had hundreds of comments. By afternoon, people I'd never met were knocking on my door to introduce themselves and apologize on behalf of the neighborhood. The video of Charlene's head poking over my fence, demanding the police arrest me because my leg was an eyesore, was the talk of the entire community. And it turned out, surprise, surprise, I was not the only one she had been terrorizing. The comment section turned into a confessional. Person after person came forward. It was like everyone had been individually scared of her for years and suddenly realized they weren't alone. Charlene, to her enormous discredit, didn't handle this gracefully. She got on the post and started commenting, which, if you've ever watched someone make their own situation worse in real time, you know how this went. She wrote this huge thing about the video was taken out of context and how she had been performing her duties as a board member and how she was the real victim because I had recorded her without consent and weaponized her image. She kept going and going and going. She wrote, and I'm paraphrasing only slightly, "I will not apologize for protecting the children of this community from disturbing imagery." And the disturbing imagery, to be clear, was my leg. Or her face. That comment was the one that really did it though. Because the next morning my phone rang and it was another board member, an actual reasonable one though, who I'd never spoken to before. He apologized profusely and told me the board was holding an emergency meeting that week and that based on everything that had come out, plus the months of documented harassment I had apparently been the victim of, plus the false police report, Charlene's position on the board was, in his words, not survivable. At the meeting, they voted and it was unanimous. Even the one other board member who had always backed her up voted to remove her. She was out, she stood there for a second like the floor had dropped out from under her, and then she pointed at me handshaking and said, "This is your fault, you did this, you came into my community and you ruined everything." And I just looked at her and said, the only thing that needed saying, "Charlene, you climbed onto a stool to look over my fence so you could call the cops about my body. You did this to yourself." All I did was hit record. She did not have anything for that and stopped out, so here's where things actually landed. Charlene is off the board permanently and the bylaws were updated so a single board member cannot issue violations on a personal vendetta anymore, which apparently is what she had been doing for years. By the way, the false police report is on record, and while I chose not to pursue it any further than that, I'm told I could have, but honestly I'm tired and I got what I wanted. It's there if she ever decides to come near me again. I'm in that pool almost every day now. Bad leg day, good leg day, doesn't matter. I get in the water and I'm just me, and nobody's head is poking over my fence anymore. And yeah guys, in this story I'm really glad that the other neighbors finally spoke up. However, it is wild how many communities let one person terrorize everyone for years, simply because nobody wanted to be the first one to push back. There's always that moment where the dam breaks, and suddenly 20 people are like, "Oh, thank God, I thought it was just me." Sometimes it just takes one person. And a user in the comments said, the "I'm a pacifist" speech in the driveway is sending me. Imagine surviving combat, coming home and having to listen to a woman who smells like lavender and box wine and to explain to you why your existence is morally bankrupt while she stands next to your truck. Another person in the comments said, "I'm glad that OP had the instinct to document everything. People always say just ignore them when it comes to HOA drama, but that only works until the person has actual authority to fine you or make your life annoying." And the next one is a very interesting brand new HOA story posted on r/FHOA, and it is titled "When an HOA Messes with a Farmer", posted by user Tall Mishdude. Or Mitchdude, I guess for Michigan, but whatever. So, I live on a farm that was created over 170 years ago. We have a couple of lakes across from us that have mostly cottages but a handful of year-round residents. A few years ago, some douchebag came to my door amid the "no trespassing, no soliciting, I don't give a damn who you think you are, this means you" signs on my driveway, and he tells me, "We are forming an HOA." I cut him off by saying, "Good luck with that, goodbye." He said, "Just hear me out as a neighbor." I said, "You have 2 minutes, starting now. In order for us to form an HOA here, we need the earliest homesteads in the area to sign on, and yours is by far the oldest, and under the current regs, we need you on board." I said, "Well, sucks to be you, now will you please F off?" This clown doubled down and told me how it would be all unicorns and rainbows if we just had an HOA to keep things under control. I said, "I don't legally even have to cut my grass, and there's like zero chance I'm giving you wealthy losers any say in what I do here. If you don't like my operation now, you won't like it when I switch to hawks, which I would do just to spite you guys. If you need my permission to start one, that is fine, but don't expect me to be any part of it, nor pay any attention to whatever kind of stupid rules you guys ever make up. I'm doing fine and I don't need Big Brother in an HOA telling me how to live. If you do, that's fine, but I need no part of it." Well, thankfully, my buddy stopped, who was a sheriff's deputy, and I said, "Just in time, this jackass is trying to get me to join an HOA and refuses to leave. Can you help him understand the word no?" I had him trespassed off the property. 3 other neighbors told me they appreciated my stopping their plans. I don't get how they think they can force someone who owns their own home, had no HOA when they bought the house, to join one. We have townships that are essentially an HOA, but with more legal oversight and proper elections. Some townships here are worse than HOAs, but I chose this location because, as I mentioned, I don't even need to cut my grass. It doesn't matter if I want to keep an old car or 10 behind the barn. If it cannot be seen from the road, the township does not care either. Anyway, I saw this guy was setting up for some sort of party at his place a couple weeks later, so I went and got a trailer of liquefied hog manure from a friend who does run hogs and sprayed my field across from him, which happened to be upwind of him. Well, apparently it worked because he sold his place like 3 months later. Just my FU and your HOA story. And the next one is a petty revenge neighbor story. It is titled Revenge on A-Hole Neighbor. So my wife and I live in a condo in a nicer part of town, not Beverly Hills or anything, but nice, quiet and safe. We have neighbors that are the exact opposite of that though. They are rude, loud and unsafe, and when they first moved in I was nice to them. I would say hi, offer to help carry things if I saw them carrying lots of things, and quarreling kids. They live one door down in the upstairs unit, and I tried to be welcoming, but I also was not super pushy with it. I was not the neighbor that would go to your door and say welcome, but if I saw you in the parking lot I would say hi, and if we knew each other we would chat. Anyway, I've always been nothing but polite to these people, and they've been nothing but rude. They flip me off when I say hi, yelled at me when I stopped a ball their son dropped from going into the parking lot, all that kind of stuff. So after a while I just gave up on trying to be friendly. I wouldn't be rude per se, but I would not greet them or go out of my way to help them. It turns out though, they are rude to everyone else. My next door neighbor, who's a kind gay old man, once asked them to pick up trash they dropped in front of his door, and they called him a racist and then a slur for gay people. They have kicked my pumpkin every year and ripped my Christmas lights off and cut my inflatable decorations that I put in the area in front of my door and then pushed me over the edge. Don't touch my decorations. These people are honestly real pieces of garbage. Onto the revenge though. 2 months ago I came out to my car and there was a glob of caulk or paint smeared over a small section of my back window, and I had to scrape it off and clean it, making me late to go to work. When I got home, a neighbor stopped me and said their cameras caught the rude neighbor smearing something on my car. I figured as much, but now I have proof. So I waited and planned, and I walked out the complex frequently, taking note of who had cameras and where they faced, determined their blind spots and what path to take to avoid being seen. I waited until last night when they parked their car out of sight of any units with cameras and went out at 1:30 AM to exact my revenge. I went to their car, let out the air from the tires, not fully flat, but enough to notice and not be safe to drive, at least over half empty. Then after the tires were flattened, I put their valve caps back on, but I added a special surprise. Liquid nails, not a ton, you cannot really see it when you walk by, but enough that you'll never get those caps off without ruining the stems. I considered putting some of them on their lug nuts, but decided that was too far. I left for work before they got out, but a neighbor stopped me on my way to my door after work and said they tried to get the caps off and fill their tires, but they couldn't, so they had to call a tow for their car and then an Uber to get everyone to school and work. Today was our last day before we moved into our new house, so I will never see them again, and I've never left our condo complex feeling happier than today, knowing I'll be rid of those asshats. And yeah guys, thanks for watching, I will see you again tomorrow, and please don't forget to subscribe.